Hi guys, Sean here from digiDirect. Today we're going to be checking out the brand new Sony A7R Mark III. This is Sony's newest camera. It'll be out very shortly. They've taken a lot of ideas and concepts from their flagship A9 camera, put it in this one, while also maintaining the high megapixel count and image quality that the A7R is known for. Now we'll discuss all these different features, but let's start with a look at the body of the camera. Physically speaking, this camera looks pretty similar to the other A7 cameras or the A9, although there have been some minor changes. The dials and the buttons have been nicely upgraded. They've got a really nice tactile feel to them. The back dial in particular is slightly raised, which is really nice, makes it a little bit easier to use. They've thankfully moved the movie record button away from the side where it is on the older A7 models, making it a lot easier to press this up by the viewfinder here now. They've also added this great little joystick, which is directly taken from the A9. I love joysticks. This is a great addition here. It makes it easier to move your AF point, makes the menu navigation a lot faster. Really good addition. I hope to see more joysticks in future. We also have the new larger battery that was taken from the A9. That's a very welcome improvement here because this is going to significantly improve the battery life on the A7R Mark III over the Mark II. We're rated at a 650 shot battery life now, which is great. That larger battery also makes the grip a little bit larger, which is not a bad thing. It makes it a little bit easier to hold, frankly. On the side here, we have dual SD card slots, which is another improvement over the A7R Mark II. One of these slots is a UHS 2 compatible slot. We also have two USB ports, HDMI, mic and headphone jacks, and a flash sync port on the side. Looking at the menus, they've added the My Menu system that we saw on the A9. So you can create a custom menu with all the important settings that you need to access quickly. That's really good because being a high-end camera, there's a lot of menu settings in here and you could be scrolling a lot if you're trying to find, search for specific menu settings. The addition of this My Menu system makes that a lot faster as well when we've got the joystick. It just means that you're going to be in the menus a lot less, so that's really nice. Note that I've also been using the new 24-105 f4 lens here when testing this camera. So all the sample photos and video you're going to see here are shot with this lens, and it's actually a really nice fit with this camera. The other major physical upgrade here in this camera is the viewfinder. It inherits the 3.69 million dot viewfinder that was in the A9. I really can't overstate how nice this viewfinder is. It's super clear, it's really, really sharp. You barely even need to punch in if you're checking focus, say you're doing manual focus for video. It's just a really good viewfinder. Now, one of the things that has not changed between the Mark II and the Mark III is the resolution of the sensor. This is still a 42 megapixel sensor inside the camera. So you're not going to see huge differences in picture quality between the Mark II and the Mark III. I'm not sure that that's a huge concern. The picture quality of the A7R Mark II is still very, very competitive to this day. It's very high picture quality, and 42 megapixels is still at the top end of sensor resolution compared to the other cameras on the market. But just be aware, picture quality is not going to be the main defining difference here between the Mark II and the Mark III. Instead, the major under the hood differences more focus on the speed of the camera, particularly autofocus and burst shooting speed. So the A7R Mark II had 399 phase detect AF points and 25 contrast detection points. The A7R Mark III has the same 399 phase detection points, but now 425 contrast detection points. As a result, Sony claims that the A7R Mark III has 2 times the AF speed that the Mark II had. In practice, that seems fairly justified. It's noticeably faster than the A7R Mark II in grabbing focus, in tracking focus, utilizing any of the more specialized like IAF and some of the other more specialized tracking features is definitely improved on the A7R Mark III compared to the Mark II. And a related note, the burst shooting speed has also been doubled. It was 5 frames per second on the Mark II, it's now 10 frames per second on the Mark III. Again, tying in with that fast autofocus, that means you're going to be better able to use this camera in a situation with fast-moving subjects, maybe sports or action, and make use of that excellent image quality and the super high-resolution sensor in situations that the Mark II maybe didn't excel at. The Mark III is going to do a lot better. Lastly, the last point on this is that Sony has even allowed us to access the menu and the shooting settings while the camera is emptying the buffer. That's something that even the A9 couldn't do, and I had a little bit of issues with the A9 for that fact. It had a big buffer, but you were kind of locked out of the camera while it was emptying the buffer. That is solved here in the A7R Mark III, which is also really, really nice. Sony has also improved the 5-axis in-body image stabilization on this camera. On the Mark II, it had 4.5 stops, and in the Mark III here, it has 5.5 stops, so an increase of 1 stop. It's a solid system. I will say it's still not quite as good as the leader in the market in this area, which is namely Olympus, but it's a good solid system. It's going to allow you to shoot photos at lower shutter speeds than you might expect, or in darker environments than you might expect, and it's going to help with handheld video. Speaking of video, the camera can shoot 4K video at up to 30 frames per second, and you can do this both in their full frame mode or that Super 35 crop mode that a lot of the Sony cameras have. You can also shoot 1080p footage at up to 120 frames per second, so you can get some nice slow motion footage. And we also see those classic Sony flat picture profiles, their S-Log2, S-Log3 as well as in here. So if you really want to shoot that super flat look so you can have a bit more latitude in color grading later, you can absolutely do that on the A7R Mark III here as well. And as a final grab bag style feature, it has a new multi-shot high-res mode, where the camera will take a series of photos, 4 photos. It'll shift the sensor by 1 pixel each time, and then you can combine those 4 photos into 1 photo. That's very similar to some other high-res modes we've seen, again, namely from Olympus. Although note, in this camera, you do have to do the combining of those photos separately in editing on your computer. It doesn't do that in camera. So we can see that the Sony A7R Mark III takes the core of the Mark II, namely that 42 megapixel sensor and the excellent image quality coming out of it, and upgrades it with some physical, ergonomic, and performance upgrades that are inspired by the A9. Namely that AF and burst shooting rate increases mean that this camera is a lot more versatile than the Mark II was. You can use that 42 megapixel in a number of situations that maybe the Mark II didn't quite excel at. Just gives it a bit of a less narrow focus than the Mark II had. The Mark II is a very popular camera. I think we're going to see the same here out of the Mark III. Now this camera is going to be out very, very shortly. When it does come out, we'll have it in store, so if you'd like to try it out, please come in and talk to our staff. We've got stores in the Sydney CBD, Bondi Junction, Miranda, Chatswood, the Brisbane and Melbourne CBD, and Cannington, Western Australia. You can also order the A7R Mark III on our website at www.digidirect.com.au. Thanks guys, take care.